to the Restoring Our City podcast, where we have candid conversations on today's topics to help connect our community. Jeswin Thomas, my esteemed colleague, welcome back to the pod. We are in this honor series, and I use the word esteemed because I want to bestow all the honor I can to you because you've done so great, and I think that's the way I could practically apply the concept of honor, is just trying to bestow all of that love and blessing on you. So have you ever been honored in your life? Like, what's the most honorable thing someone's done to you?
What's the most honorable thing someone has done to me? That's a great question. I don't know.
Have you just been
Have
a
I ever been
dishonorable person your whole life?
no, yeah, I don't know. I mean, have I ever been honored? I don't know about that, but that's a great question. You know what? I always feel like when we say the word honor, you're always thinking about what you're doing in relation to someone older than you, right? Or
Yeah.
someone maybe in more of a position of authority, like a judge, right? Like you go and it's like, oh, sorry, your honor. There's always that concept, but am I honorable? I don't know about this. Am I too young to be honorable? That's just this might be my opinion
No,
about
you're
it,
not.
but I don't know.
That's a
Respect
great
maybe.
great
Honor? I don't
example.
know.
Great example about the judge, man, because I've seen like judges react. Like you see these like Instagram reels or these TikTok videos of these judges who like lose it, where like people who come to the courtroom and are completely disrespectful and go out of line and say stuff that you're not supposed to say to a judge. And they're like, oh, here's another 5 years. Here's another, like just tacking it on. I'm like, well, see, there's a really great practical way of how dishonoring might not be helping you live a long life, or at least a long life outside of prison, right? Because then you know how that goes. But I think this is an interesting topic that we are doing a series on specifically. We're talking about honor. And one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about honor is in light of the world today, that we're talking about all of these hard, polarizing topics, the way people respond, the way people talk to each other. When we try to peel it back, we understand we are really losing an aspect of honoring each other and
Mm,
understanding that concept. And Justin, you and I just talking about it and seeing all the craziness in the news, there's a fundamental concept that I think the Bible really teaches us of how we should be treating each other that we are losing in society completely today.
mm.
And I think fundamentally it starts with understanding a concept of honor, but then also who do we honor, right? And there's the age old verses that we've learned since we were little kids about honoring our father and mother. And so I think that's a good place to start, because now in this series, we want to dedicate this series and this episode to talking about honoring our parents and how practical and simple that sounds, but it's probably more complicated than we may make it out to be, right? So when you
Yeah.
think about like that verse, what's some of the first things that come to your mind?
Oh man, I mean, you think about just like you said, parents, right? Like how do you honor them? And that's a great question to again contemplate. Do we do that well right now? Do we not? I know that for a lot of our parents, their biggest fear is just living in a nursing home long
Yeah.
term. So I feel like the way that you dishonor them potentially is by throwing them in. Well, at least that's our concept of it. But we understand there's family experiences, different things that obviously people go through.
Yes.
But that's just a funny one. When you're growing up, you always think about dad's like, oh man, my parents' biggest fear is being in a nursing home one day. So if I ever wanted to dishonor them, that's exactly what I would do.
Yeah. That's the threat, right? Like don't
Yeah.
put me, growing up, it's like that's the threat. But then, I've seen so much of that growing up, just that conversation about that as a joke. It starts it off when you're young. And then now I'm getting older. My parents are getting older, and I see family and friends deal with some of these situations, and that conversation starts to change. But
Oh
there is
yeah.
this underlying concept of honor and, do I take care of my parents? And like, I think the obvious answer, especially for South Asians, is yes. But then that gets complicated, right? With health issues and things like that. But
Well, I
putting
think
that aside, like, how do you honor, right?
yeah, well, I think it's just their fear of like you see sometimes when you go to these places, and at least in the Western mentalities, it's not just that you're there, it's also feel like, people kind of forget that these old individuals exist. And that's a fear. I mean, maybe that's the way that you honor them. It's not the location, but it's really the remembrance of that relationship. And how do you do that well, that really plays into that fear of a nursing home, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's other aspects too, where it's like, hey, are you going to take care of me because I took care of you? And there's just like
Yeah,
give and take. But then there's
sure.
also, I think in the South Asian culture, it is so family oriented, very community oriented. But there's also other ways that we can honor our parents, or maybe they expect us to honor them, right? And now I am a parent myself, and kind of the ways that I expect my kids to honor me. And I say honor instead of obey because I think there is a clear difference that we should talk about. But we think about like career paths,
Mhm.
education, who you marry, those kind of things. Like there's aspects of each of those major life decisions that I believe in our South Asian culture that lends itself to incorporating our parents into those decisions by honoring, not just listening to maybe what they recommend, but how do I honor? Have you had I mean, you've gone through some of these major life moments. Have you thought about how you've honored your parents in any of those moments, like marriage or career, house, anything like
Yeah, I
that?
mean, by God's grace, I think I ended up with 2 parents that, are very biblically based, so when it came to making a career decision, there was never any pressure to be like, "You have to do this," or "You have to be a doctor, you have to be an engineer." They're like, "Ah, you seem good at math, like, if you wanna pursue that, you can go ahead and pursue that." I think their, low-key dream would have been if I followed their career paths and became a teacher as well, but they both know that I have no patience for people and teaching them, so they knew that that wasn't destined for me at least. But when it did come to things like marriage, like really bringing them into the process early on, not just coming up with the decision and saying, "Hey, this is exactly what I want to do, and this is who I'm going to marry." I think was one way that I honored them. When I was even on dating apps and saying, "Hey, I'm going to go visit this person in this place and see if it pans out," and they're of this denomination, may not be Pentecostal. These kind of things are ways that I feel like in the process, how do you honor them?
Yeah.
It really is, one way to think about it, not just dump your decision on them when it's already at like the touchdown or the end goal line, in the
Yeah.
red zone, if you will, with the football analogy. But I don't know, Joby, how have you seen that in your life?
No, it's a great analogy. It made me think of how many South Asian couples do you know that have eloped? Like, have you heard stories of people who have eloped? And I'm not criticizing you. It's, probably have a lot of different reasons for it, but it's probably more rare than common because you wanna involve your parents in some of those major milestones, and I say that cautiously because I don't wanna paint everybody with a broad brush, but one of the ways that, I felt like I wanted to honor my parents is like, "Hey, if I'm interested in somebody before I got married and all that kind of stuff, like, even when I met my wife, it's like, "Hey, I'm gonna talk to this person, like, what do you think?" And I involved them. Not that they would influence my decision because they knew I was pretty stubborn and I would make that decision on my own, but I did involve them, and I always found it fascinating. People would be like, "You talk to your parents about this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do." And it's kinda eye-opening now that I look back at it, how many of these frank conversations I've been blessed to have with my parents because they created that avenue for me to be very honorable to them later down in the road. I mean, of course, I've been
Yeah.
rebellious in my life too, but at the same time, they've created a space where it made it easier for me to honor them, you know? I think that maybe
Yeah.
that's part of this that we can unpack in scripture, but
Yeah,
yeah,
and just knowing both of our parents, it's just a testament to who they are as individuals. So that's maybe one way we can show them some honor in this episode too, because
yeah.
that may not be the experience of so many of our peers. On the flip side, it's so funny because sometimes when you think about non-South Asians, right? Like this is such a casual conversation. Hey, I'm interested in this person. Hey, I like this person. I'm going to be dating this person. We don't have that level of openness with our parents, if you will. But even though the ways, in the ways that we do have it, we want to honor them with that. So it's just interesting to think about
Yeah, I'm sure our parents are gonna listen to this and be like, "What are you talking about, you
that.
dishonorable fool? Like, what you have not brought any of this up to me." So maybe perspectives of honor. That's a interesting way to look at it too. But it's so important, not just kind of we were joking around a little bit and maybe some of these key areas of our lives, but it's important for us to have this concept because if we don't honor our parents well, guess what? You're not going to honor anybody well. And I think that's the challenge of this episode for anybody listening to this. You'll be like, oh, yeah, I understand that. Of course, I love my parents. Or if you're fortunate to still have your parents and like care for them, you might think of, oh, yeah, we've had a great relationship. So who cares? Why do I even have to listen to this episode? You know why? Because look at all the toxicity out there, right?
Mhm.
And I bet you most of the people that can easily spew and dishonor other people that's not even their parents don't practice this with the authority in their lives or even understand the social construct or the hierarchy of relationships, right? And it's really important that the Bible actually speaks about this as almost a command, like literally a command when we talk about the 10 commandments too, right? And
Yeah.
one of them is honor your father and mother. But I know we're going to look at some scripture to kind of help us understand how can we honor well? I think we need to practically understand how do we honor well. So from a scripture standpoint, Jeswin, I know you picked out some verses. What do we want to dive into today to help us practically do this?
Yeah, I mean, you brought it up, Joby. It's one in the Ten Commandments, but two, it's kind of expanded or expounded on in Ephesians chapter 6, just verses 1, 2, and 3. So it says this, and I'm reading from the ESV version. It says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with the promise that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. So any first thoughts that you have there based on just what I read, Jobin?
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I was reading an article, kind of, I know this is alluding to the commandments in Exodus. And a really interesting anecdote I read about the Ten Commandments is that it's actually split into two. The first four commandments are kind of your duties to God. And then the rest, the six, are your duties to one another. And so when you look at those two lists, it's like, oh, the order is really, really important. And guess what's the first commandment in the duties to one another? It's to honor your father and mother. It's like there's
Mhm.
this principle here about the order and importance of it. And I thought that was so important that this verse in Ephesians calls out to that verse, but then also says that there's a promise with it. So I thought that was just so cool that it ties it all together and highlights and underscores the importance and gravity of it.
Yeah. I mean, even when you're saying this is the first verse in that second section of how you ought to do that with one another, I would have put some of the other verses maybe higher on that list, right? Like maybe you should put killing first on that list. Like thou shall not. Maybe that should be up there, right? Maybe some
Like
of the
number one.
common stuff should be down there, but definitely murder should be number one. Adultery, exactly. Adultery should be up there too. Stealing,
Right.
yeah, it's pretty ideal too. But before all of that, it's honor your father and mother. So to your point, like that shows you there's some gravity here, and even just thinking about the Ten Commandments in general. Just an anecdote really quickly that I learned. From a biblical perspective, we count them as like 10 commandments, and there's these lists of actions that we have to do. From actually a Jewish perspective, it's actually called the 10 sayings.
Hmm.
And the first saying isn't our first commandment. The first saying, I had to go back to Exodus chapter 20. The first saying is, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. That's number one. And from there is the other 9 sayings or 9 commandments. So it's all predicated on this idea that I am the one that brought you out of slavery.
Hmm.
I'm going to tell you as God to do certain things, because freedom doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want. Freedom is the ability to really build a society that's going to flourish if you listen to what my commands are going to be. And in that list of commands, it's to honor God and then honor your parents. So this is pretty integral in even God's design on how to build a flourishing society. And I think we alluded to some of that today, right? I think this being something that's broken down within our culture is maybe why we see society kind of struggling nowadays, right? Society really not flourishing, becoming more divided. And if anything, we're splintering at the seams. And it's a question of like, why is that happening? It's probably because we don't know how to honor God first, but more than all the other problems we have, we don't know how to honor our parents, which directly goes into how we can honor authorities. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, what a great like nugget there because man, there's so much to unpack there because you started talking about Exodus and how it gives the foundation of like why should you even listen to the rest of these sayings is because I rescued you out of Egypt.
Mhm.
And it's almost like this reason. I love how you portray that because he didn't just say, "All right, you shall have no other gods before me." That's it. If that was just the first sentence,
Yeah,
then that would be kind of arrogant in a sense if you really didn't understand who God is. But then you
yeah,
realize what you came from and you realize he's demonstrating that he's worthy of honor and his place in the relationship he has with you. I think that's critical because then translate that to your familiar relationship, right? With your
Mhm.
parents, like you're not here without them. Like
Yeah.
there's a hierarchy here, and that's true for everybody, whether you had your biological parents in your life or not. You are not of your own. You've come from
Mm.
somewhere, and you're not the final authority in your life. So you've got to respect authority and honor it as well. So I love how there's a substance there to say, hey, 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 before you think you know it all, remember this. And I think I know there's a lot to unpack here. I have so much to say about this,
Man,
but like
it's
you know what I
so
mean?
good. I've never thought about that analogy between God bringing the people out of Egypt and then directly tying that to your parents literally bringing you
Yeah,
into this world and raising you. And yet, one of the things that I think we need to differentiate here is we still have to figure out, well, what does honor actually mean through all this, right?
yeah,
Even kind of jumping back into Ephesians, it's interesting that there's a contrast here between obedience and honor, right? It literally says, children, obey your parents in the Lord,
hmm
but honor your father and mother. And so sometimes I think even in South Asians, and this is maybe something that parents struggle with and also children struggle with, is we equate the two and we think honor equals obedience.
hmm hmm
And that's partly true for children, right? People that are not of age to make solid decisions, like your children, Jobin. They should not be questioned. They should obey your authority, period. Right? But hopefully you're stewarding them in a way that says, hey, one day y'all have to be really good decision makers. And at that point, I will be an advisor. I hope you honor my input, but at the same time, like, you need to be able to be self-sufficient and make your own decision here. So really, for me, we need to really differentiating honor doesn't equal obedience. And maybe part of the reason we struggle as a culture is that is so ingrained to South Asian cultures. Even people that are 40, 50 years old have such anxiety with doing something that might go against their parents' opinion. I don't know if you've seen that. I don't know if you also see that as a problem, but really that's one thing I wanted to differentiate here from the passage in Ephesians.
Yeah, that's a great. And first of all, I do need to clip this because my kids have started to learn how to talk to Google and play our podcast. And I may have put this on Instagram, but like, there's one day I walked into the kitchen, I heard your voice, and we don't live in the same state. And I'm like, what is Jeswin doing in my kitchen? Because my kids, they find it hilarious when they see your face talking on the podcast. But I'm going to specifically play that clip of you instructing them to listen to me. So I'm going to just put that on repeat. Maybe this going to be the snippet that we play, but totally agree with you. And I think even from a South Asian cultural perspective, we do have different family dynamics. And sometimes it could be a crutch, right? We're like overly dependent on our parents and we're afraid to rebel against authority, or even we conflate honor and obedience. And then we kind of, I don't know, it's really hard because I've seen both ways where people completely rebel and go the opposite way and then don't honor them later in life. And maybe the nursing home situation is a toxic one sometimes when it's like, well, I don't need you anymore, right? Like, and
Mhm.
that's really sad to see.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think there are some parallels there, but it's like going back to Exodus and saying, hey, here's the reason why. Maybe there's a lack of understanding of where we came from and what we have so much in terms of value because of someone else, right? Because
Yeah.
and then like perfect example is the cross, right? Like when we look at Ephesians 2,
Mhm.
we were chatting before because when we used to go back to the same church, we went through this whole sermon series on the book of Ephesians. I think we even did it in our small group and I have a ton of notes. But it's so interesting how that book too is divided in half. And when we talk about the grace of God, the immense glorifying it, it's almost like this exuberant description of grace. And I'm
Yeah.
like, why is it so extraordinary? Why does Paul go to this length to say the grace of God in this way and describe it this way? It's because like all the stuff that comes after it and how we love each other is dependent on our understanding of how much we've been saved from, that you have no choice but to honor and respect people. And man, now that I look at all these crazy social media comments, you can almost directly correlate to be like, "Hey, does that person think about the grace of God
Mm.
personally in their lives
Mhm.
before posting that or talking about somebody this way?" No matter how
Mhm.
right logically you are, you probably are not thinking about the grace of God and what
Mhm.
we have come from, right? It's just
Yeah, that's good.
crazy to see the connections here.
No, 100%. That's a really, really, really good point, that you made there. But, on the flip side, as much as we have to think about our parents in that light, I've also seen the flip side where parents can sometimes be toxic with this concept too, where if
Sure.
the children don't blindly obey, like, it causes such issues. One story that I recall is, two individuals that were friends, both of different denominations, both being believers, eventually wanted to elope and get married. And one set of parents just had such a hard struggle that the other individual was not from the same denomination, to the point where, it became such a problem, they didn't go to the wedding.
Wow.
And it came down to such a dire situation like that. And unfortunately, I think a few years after that point, I think one of the side of parents ended up passing away. But you just imagine, that sort of situation. It's like, hey, I want to honor you guys by, letting you guys have your input. But when the parents take it to the other extreme, saying I almost want to treat you like a 5-year-old child for your entire life, where you have to obey me no matter what, and if you don't, you're dishonorable.
Yeah.
I think that's the other extreme, and it's hard, right? Like, how do you try to still honor your parents in situations like that? Because I think we've all heard stories where even if it comes to a career switch, right? You talk to some pastors where they're like, "I want to go into ministry," and the parents are like, "What are you doing?" Right? Like, we didn't
Yeah.
come to America for this life. You don't want you going to beg other people for money is not what we came to this land for. You hear some of these things from the parents' perspective, and you have to at least wonder, like, man, like, how do you still honor your parents when they're wrong? There's no other way to put it. It's dead wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really interesting when you look at the very the next couple verses in Ephesians, especially verse 4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. It's almost like Paul's not just talking about one phase of society, but he's also talking about the authoritative people too, right? Like, hey, it's a two-way street. Like, we honor others, but if we provoke our children, they're not going to honor us. And if we don't honor our parents, they're probably more likely. And I heard this great example, especially when I got married, and this concept of love and respect, and especially in a marital relationship. Like, if you want to love your wife and she thrives on that, she'll respect you as a husband, and as she respects you, you learn to just love her more, and there's this cycle. It's never like this, just one or the other, but it's this giving and outdoing each other in love, right? And
Yeah.
I think it kind of goes a little bit in the same way in terms of honor, right? Like, we can honor each other, and it just, especially if we treat each other the right way, in the biblical way, we end up having these better attitudes, right? Um, I think even attitude wise is one of the key differentiators between honor and obedience. Like, in terms
Mm.
of honor, maybe we need to define that for our listeners, right? When we think about honor, I've read some definitions about it really equating to empowering somebody, or even, giving them esteem and even blessing. And I think there's other scriptures, I believe, in Hebrews as well, where we talk about, like, honoring those who are in the ministry, and I might get the reference wrong, but, like, honoring those in the ministry and teaching and things like that, and even equating that to, like, a double portion, right? Like, even blessing them tangibly.
Yeah.
So there's this concept of honor that is like a blessing that we bestow on somebody because of their position and authority, whereas or obedience really is like, hey, I gotta listen and actually faithfully obey because of the instruction, right?
Yeah, I mean, even expanding on that, I think you were about to bring up that concept of even respect, right? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
how do you differentiate maybe honor and respect? And sometimes people that are in certain positions, whether it's your parents, whether it's your boss, whether it's someone else, like, there's a level of honor that comes with. I mean, that should come with that title. I think
Yeah.
society's forgotten that in the way that we talk about maybe our president, right? Like, not my president. What are you talking about? He's going to be president for 4 years, regardless of who's ever in power. We think about authorities such as law enforcement, whether it's church, whether it's teachers. It doesn't matter. That authoritative figure comes with a sense of honor, but may not come with maybe a level of respect that you might not see. For example, right? I think I could always name a bad boss that we've probably had. You still honor the boss. You're not gonna like badmouth the boss or publicly try to shame them because it's gonna screw your job up. But
Right.
you might also think in the back of your mind, like, man, like, I don't maybe respect your decision making or how you sort of undercut people or make me overwork or, the list goes on, or maybe I see you as someone that's not deserving of that position. But there's a differentiation there between honor and respect that we can also bring into like the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And this reminds me of a conversation I had on TikTok. I got some response because I don't know how the conversation got to honor, but as you mentioned, like even presidential authorities, we might not agree with what's going on, and then people have this commentary. But there's this verse in First Peter 2:17. It says, "Honor everyone, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the emperor." And then I was just doing some research. I'm like, okay, what is Peter talking about here? Honor the emperor. And as you look at the historical context, who was the emperor at that time? It was Nero. And
Jeez.
it was like, when you look at the history of Nero, he's infamous, right? Even outside of the
Mhm.
Bible about how horrible and evil that guy. I read a story how I think this might be hearsay, but he kicked somebody down a flight of stairs or something who was pregnant and like killed the like you're
Hmm.
talking about levels of evil here, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't just tweeting insensitive things, right?
Yeah.
He's doing horrible things. And then Peter has the audacity to say, honor the emperor. What does that
Yeah.
mean? Right? Like
Yeah.
you could still bestow honor because it's God. You're honoring the people who put those people in those positions of authority, right? Like
Yeah.
honoring God. He's the one who set that person for that point in time, right?
Yeah, I mean, even you think about Jesus, right? Like people hated the Roman government
Yeah.
and they asked him, is it lawful to pay these taxes? And what does he say? Like, give unto Caesar what's due unto Caesar, but give unto God what is due unto God. And even thinking about maybe other examples from the Bible that pop up, I think one that we talked about is about David and Saul, right? I think, in one sense, David always honored the position that Saul had, even when he was trying to kill him, right? I think it's incredible. David knew in some senses he was going to be anointed to be the next king. But even as Saul pursued him, there's times where David could have killed Saul outright. The people would have been for him. He would have taken the title, but he never took that authority or that judgment into his own hands. He's like, you know what? If God is going to do this, then I will leave it up to God, but I will always honor the person that God put in charge and I will let God take care of how I'm supposed to become king. And
Yeah.
you even see that with this example.
Yeah. No, it's a great kind of contrast too. And I can't help but think about today's world and how we complain so much about how we are how we complain, but then we're also dishonorable to people in authority because we disagree with them. And I think
Mhm.
there's a lack of nuance in some of these conversations, and people tend to paint everybody with a broad brush and label them and all this kind of stuff. But there's this lack of honor, and it's almost this lack of understanding that God has put these people in these positions of influence and authority and things like that, where we should understand. And I think tying it back to our parents is because of this structure, this like social ethic, right? Like
Mhm.
there's this construct that we have within relationships of being children, having parents, understanding honor in this hierarchy. And when we don't understand those concepts foundationally, it's really hard as we grow older to do that for others because we
Yeah.
don't see people as authoritative that we should listen or submit or obey. We think of these words as so negative that we're like under slavery, but we're not. There's a difference between blind obedience and true honor, right?
Yeah, I mean, even just to talk about that point, going back to Ephesians, if you look at verses 2 and 3, it literally says, honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with the promise that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Now, I guess the question here is, if it says, I will honor my father and mother, and therefore I'm going to live a long life, and then I'm going to succeed in the land, sometimes we take that to mean like this is talking about you personally, like you as an individual. If you honor your parents, you're going to live to be 90 years old and you're going to be like a billionaire. But
Yeah.
that's really not what God is talking about here. It's really talking to the people of Israel as a whole. That's saying, if you understand this concept of honoring authority in the home, that is so foundational to society that the society itself will be set up for success and it will go well with the society as a whole and you will be able to live properly in the land that I am going to give to you to possess.
Yep.
And I think that's so true for us today, right? Like we're not the people of Israel, we still live here, but if we have this breakdown of this concept of honoring authority in the home, then the rest of society crumbles as we're seeing it happen right now. But if we understand that foundationally, it will go well with us all in the land, and we will be able to possess and honor where we live properly as well.
Yeah. I was reading before we jumped on like a passage because I was starting to read through honor and all these examples in the Bible and especially in the Old Testament. I don't have the verse in front of me, but in Deuteronomy, it started talking about children who disobey their parents and how it talks about like I'm gonna throw you out into the town and the elders and they come and they like stone you. And it's very archaic, right? But I think the emphasis was like, look at this communal relationship of honor and understanding obedience and why this is so important because it's not just like this private individual mistake or lack of a relationship. It is a communal aspect because if you start to dishonor your father and mother, and this isn't, again, not blind obedience to your point. It has a community impact. When you
Mhm,
grow up in a society where we do have to love one another, and Jesus talks about this so much, then you look at this whole principles of Ephesians in the back half of it of why do you think it talks about children obey your parents right after it talks about husbands and wives and like all of these kind of things, right? Like
mhm.
why are all these family dynamics here? It just highlights the way that we treat each other and that's, I think, why you and I are just excited to talk about this concept of honor. It's because, man, this is the problem with society. Like, we don't understand honor. And then there's, I mean, look at, yeah, I'm a parent. And then you think about all of the stuff happening in our world that seems to break and fight against family dynamics, right?
Yeah.
And some people might make that to be a political statement, but like, okay, well, think about it. There's rules and stuff in our society that are preventing children and empowering them to make your decisions without a parent's input
Mhm,
or even just ideological things that really focus on just you and living your truth and being your own person without any kind of parental involvement. I mean, this is kind of crazy, right? And it
mhm.
almost diminishes the role of parents in a children's life. And then they have no understanding of honor and understanding of authority and hierarchy. So, like, you're just not going to be a contributing member of society if you just don't have that concept, right?
Yeah.
It's yeah, scary.
100%. And I mean, we could talk about the tangible breakdown that we're seeing today. And like you said before, right? Like this just plays into the rest of society. And I think in some future episodes, we're definitely gonna try to explore a little bit more about how it plays maybe into church dynamics, how it plays into societal dynamics, for sure. But it's so foundational if it starts in the home. I think the second thing we should definitely explore before we wrap this thing up is honor and shame are always brought into our mind, especially because we come from a culture that, that's the foundation of it. So it's almost like sometimes we have to figure out what honor means by maybe looking at what it doesn't mean in the shame dynamic. And at least with shame, I feel like that's something that we all can relate to or all can understand. When we fail, when we are publicly exposed, we can totally understand what shame is. And therefore, thinking about that, how do we, on the flip side, really make someone publicly be honored for something that they did? Maybe it's something that we don't do enough, or even privately when we do the right thing or we do something that's worthy of honor. Is it interesting that we don't maybe feel the feelings of honor that we should, because we definitely feel the feelings of shame when we do? I don't know if you've ever thought about that at all, Jobin.
Yeah, it's like it's. I've heard this at seminars and conferences, and I think even on this podcast, I recall great episodes of people talking about honor and shame, and uh, just a just the struggle that I think we as South Asians deal with it. But when you think about how it's really the opposite of honor, and we're exposed in a sense and we're ashamed of some of those things, but it's really, I think, back to the Garden of Eden, right? And like um before all of the sin, but Adam and Eve were naked but not ashamed, and then
Hmm.
after disobedience they hid, right? And they were exposed, and really they dishonored God, they dishonored even trusting in him, his position, like that actually he was who he says he was, and then he would do and keep them safe and everything that he promised them, right? Like they felt like they were lacking something. And so there's like this dishonoring of God and
Mhm.
who he is. And that leads to shame. And I think that's so crazy when we think about shame as like the opposite of God's blessing. And when we honor somebody, I'm actually blessing someone or bestowing esteem on someone. And so I think, yeah, it's kind of interesting when we get into these bouts of shame that um, there's an aspect of dishonor there, and that's the result of like the world that we live in, right?
Yeah, and so maybe, one way that we have to at least think about this is I don't know if there's been any stories that come to your mind of how have you seen honor done well, in life? I think I could speak to one. I think, at my wedding, I still remember my parents took, quite a bit of time on their speech, but one place where I think, it was a surprise to me and definitely something that I definitely appreciated is it was my mom's oldest brother that first came to the United States, and then he brought over all the siblings and eventually, their spouses, and of course, like, we wouldn't have the lives that we have today without, him just single-handedly on one income, figuring out how to sustain an entire family and extended family, their educations and different things like that, and, at my wedding, my parents, took the time to like make him a plaque and have him stand up in front of everyone and publicly recognize him. And it was something that was definitely moving for him and the entire family to get that kind of honor on such an important day. And I
Yeah.
completely appreciated that, right? Like my wedding day would not be my wedding day without my uncle that made these moves before I was born to see my parents like honor him like that and to see him like receive it like that was definitely a touching moment that I won't forget. But that's one of the examples that definitely pops into my mind when it comes to how was honor really done well.
Yeah, I love that too. It's like most of society would say, "Hey, well, it's my wedding day. It needs to be all about me, me, me." And maybe there's this aspect of our culture that just tries to value that, and honoring somebody is almost taking that moment and bestowing some glory and some weight on someone else in appreciation for what they I think that's a beautiful example, and I love that, and I remember that being there. I thought you were gonna say you honored your Indian culture by coming out in an auto rickshaw. Well, maybe that is an aspect of it too, but I thought that was a beautiful way to honor your culture, because there's no practical reason to do that besides just speeding through the dance floor. Um, but yeah, I love that, man. I think back to some mission trips, right? Like I've gone to Orissa, and I remember going and these like kids right when I arrived, like getting out of a car, and I don't know any of these people, and they like put these flowers around my neck, and it was just like this like appreciation. I felt so inadequate, and like talk about imposter syndrome. I was like, "What am I doing here?" And they're like, "Oh, they were treating me like really well and just showing me honor." And it was like the poorest of the poor places too, right? It was like really tough place to
Yeah.
be, but at the same time, I just felt so amazing, and that's one of those things where receiving honor, you realize like and not to like hype ourselves up or anything like that, especially when we've been honored. But like you think about how you do that towards other people or how God is so deserving of honor. Like I don't think we understand the concept well enough because maybe it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, right? Like what is the example? I brought you out of Egypt. Like, look at
Mm.
what was done on the cross, and that's the story, and then the instructions of honor come into play, and maybe that's what's missing, and that's why, like, the gospel is so important. It's almost just like, "Hey, like, preach the gospel, let's just get everybody to be Christian." Well, no, it's just you don't realize how foundational this story is for the thriving of society, right? Like, the
Yep.
way that we treat each other all hinges on our understanding of the gospel, and that's mind blowing when you think of like, oh, of course, honor your father and mother. Super simple verse that I learned when I was in third grade, right? But then you realize how it has an impact on all of relationships, and I think that's a game changer.
Yeah. And I know we're going to explore that in some future episodes here, but hopefully this was a good setup to really being like, why is this concept so foundational? I mean, maybe one parting thought here. I think you brought it out where, again, going back to that idea of like, I'm the one that brought you out of Egypt, and seeing also just Jesus on the cross. And then when he gives us a command, how do you not honor that based on what he's already done? I think maybe some of the reasons why we find it so quick, I mean, easy to dishonor people or maybe not be as honorable as a society is probably because we just don't know people's backstories, right? We judge
Mm,
people based on like a one line quote. Maybe we judge them based on an interaction. Maybe there's a spiritual leader in our life, or even some governmental people in our life, but even our parents sometimes. I think one of the things that we just don't know is that backstory, right? And you see this with the children of Israel. As time goes on, they really don't honor the Lord. Maybe it's because they forgot who brought them out of Egypt. And even in our life, yeah, we understand that concept of the cross, but sometimes as time goes on, like we're so quick to forget. And maybe part of the reason why even we find it hard to honor authorities, we don't know,
mhm,
some of those stories of like, when tell me about what brought you out of Egypt, right? Like, tell me why I, as an individual, am here. I don't understand my relation to you. And beyond that, I don't actually understand you as an individual. I wonder if we did, we understood some of those stories, we understood some of those hardships, we understood some of those things that God had done in their life, if we'd be quicker to honor and slower to judge and slower to become
mhm.
angry. I don't know if, you have a thought on that.
No, I bet you if you peel back the comments of dishonor towards other people and you say, "Hey, well, break that down for me. Where does this stem from?" And you try to peel it back and understand, it just comes from a lack of understanding. And like, did you just watch that clip? Or did you understand what the sentiment was? And yeah, this might be offensive. Or did you understand the story of this person? And I think that's where it always comes to, if you sat face to face with this person and you talk to them to understand them, I bet you'd come to a better consensus. And I think that's a great example. And I think about dumb example here, but Will Smith's Parents Just Don't Understand song from back in the early 90s or whatever, before you were born, probably. But it's like this old song, but I think it's like common for every generation or every culture to go through this teenage angst, right? Of like, my parents just don't understand. I think from a South Asian standpoint, especially second gen, we might blame it on, oh, well, they just didn't understand our language or they didn't understand our culture. But guess what? That's cross cultural, cross generational, where kids feel like their parents don't understand. But is it because we never took the time to understand where they came from? And I
Mm.
think about it like my kids are still young, but they'll probably get to teenage years and rebel and like look at me and my wife and be like, "Oh, you guys just don't understand," right? I'm like, "Wait, we speak the same language though. I do understand." But it's not that. It's literally just we don't share the same experiences and maybe for a good reason. And maybe that's why the Bible lists this out. Children, obey your parents. Because guess what? They are in a different phase of life that they have walked through this so that you think about that, right? Like there's other people in our lives that have gone through different experiences that we can learn from and and I think it's worth it to honor them too. Not always agree, not always blindly obey, but to honor and respect the authority and positions that God has placed people in, right? Um, man, it's such a deep topic. It's like there's so many layers to it. And so, yeah, we're talking about parents, but think about this as the foundation to all the other roles and people we interact with in society, right? When we talk
Yeah.
about church or talk about government and authority, this is a really critical concept for us to have any conversation ever, right? To do that. So, um, I think it'd be cool if, even like unpacking our parents' stories and maybe surprises to come. But it'd be really cool to like better understand some of those nuances as well. So,
Yeah.
great topic, Jeswin. Looking forward to unpacking more of this.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to go listen to that Will Smith song tonight. And clearly, if he didn't understand honor then, that's probably why he slapped Chris Rock. So totally makes sense now.
That's why he's making such dishonorable music now. It's just, that's sorry to slander Will Smith, but I'm like, come on, man. Like,
uh,
let's get back to our roots, right? Let's go back to where we came from. Anyway,
it's okay. We dishonored him before with Pursuit of
yes.
Slappiness. Go back and
Yes,
listen to
exactly.
that if you need to.
Like, apologize for that, and then we'll get back in good graces. Anyway, great episode. Loved unpacking this. And guys, love to hear your feedback. Continue to subscribe. Let us know your feedback. Throw in those comments, even if we disagree. Send us DMs. I love to hear your thoughts on this episode. But Thanks, everyone. Look forward to the next one.